All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday. What we'll do today is we'll deal a little bit more with China, and then I will give you some project time to get going on that. Okay. So I have a few more things to share with you regarding the project, and then I'll give you some free time to work on that. Okay. So Unati is here this morning. Good morning, Unati, and Shota's here. Good morning to you as well. Let's do this. So yesterday we were dealing with China, right? For maybe the second or third day. And we said that, of course, modern China is kind of born with the fall of Manchu Dynasty in 1911. And there's kind of two competing groups trying to sort of gain power in China. We talked about the Kuomintang, who are a nationalist party. Under Sun Yat-sen, they're kind of a democratic socialist group, kind of like the Bernie Sanders of early 20th century China, if you're into that sort of thing. But of course, after Sun Yat-sen dies, the party will be taken over by Jiang Jieshi, who's a little more militaristic and a little more autocratic than Sun Yat-sen was, right? In the other corner, we had Mao, right? Mao and his communists are originally part of Kuomintang, but Jiang Jieshi will drive them out, right? After he drives them out, Mao will start to build a following in kind of the rural areas, right, in the farming areas of China, particularly in the north. We read some sections of the text yesterday that sort of explained that again, Jiang Jieshi had just been kind of in the north of China. He had managed to sort of conquer the northern part, and he sets himself up a government in Nanking, right, where he is kind of the head of state. So he, again, sets him up as a bit of a military dictator and pushes the communists out of the party altogether, right? Now, these two groups kind of go into civil war because, again, Jiang Jieshi's control of China at this point is kind of loose, right? So he's kind of managed to get these sort of local warlords under control, but he hasn't been able to establish full control over China, right? The other problem he's got is that now he's got these communists who are, out in the countryside, building strength against him. And then, of course, he's got the Japanese, right? And the Japanese have occupied Manchuria, and they want to basically make Manchuria a part of Japan, right? So Jiang Jieshi manages to kind of gain control, but it's a loose control, right? It's not a firm, strong control. So in kind of the early part of the 1930s, what we see is that Japan seizes Manchuria. And initially, Jiang Jieshi decides to kind of just let them go. But the pressure he gets from his party and from the people kind of force him to engage with the Japanese. And so in this kind of instance, he and Mao are kind of maybe not fighting side by side, but they're definitely fighting the same opponent, right? So there's some battles going on between the Japanese and between Jiang Jieshi's nationalists and Mao's communists, until about 1941, right, when World War II starts, and then we have the Soviet Union and the US kind of involved in that effort a little bit as well, right? So I'd like you to read one more short section of the textbook and answer a few more questions. This section will describe what happens after Mao proclaims People's Republic of China. So we know that, actually, I can jump ahead here. Actually, yeah, I'm going to do this first, and then we'll do that. So we said that both the nationalists and the communists are kind of trying to fight off the Japanese, not entirely successfully. And then World War II begins. The civil war between the nationalists and the communists is kind of put on hold. And then once the war is over and Japan is defeated, Japan sort of pulls out of Manchuria, out of China, and it's kind of a race, right, to take over the material and the resources that the Japanese have left behind, right? And so there's kind of a race to get their hands on this weaponry and things like that. The fighting starts again, and Mao is able to win a decisive victory, right? So Jiang Jieshi and his nationalists flee to Formosa, or what's now Taiwan, and Mao is kind of free to proclaim the People's Republic of China in 1949, right? And we said, there we go. We said yesterday that Mao didn't really have any opposition, right? Because most of Jiang Jiexi's Kuomintang had fled, right? They either went to Taiwan with him, or they kind of, seeing as that government seems to have been corrupt, they kind of pocketed as much money as they could and ran off to somewhere else. And so by the time Mao takes power, there's really no one left to oppose him, right? He doesn't have to fight a civil war like Lenin did against against the White Army, right? So, so Mao is kind of, has succeeded in sort of conquering China, and now he's going to put into effect his version of communism, right? Because we said again, China is kind of an unindustrialized country. It's mostly poor agricultural peasants, and again, its population has grown to the point where it's hard for the country to feed itself, right? Because it's only relying on very basic farming techniques. So Mao's going to have to do something about that if he wants to build, a strong, powerful China, which of course he does. So that said, there we go. I would like you to read just this short section here, and then answer questions 5, 7, 8, 10, and 12, okay? So I'm going to give you just a few minutes to do that. I'll put some time on the clock here, and then we can discuss, then we'll take a break, then we'll do some project stuff, okay? I think. Oops. There might be one page missing from the reading, but I'm just going to fix it right now, okay? So guys, I'm just going to add a new version into Teams there of the reading. So you'll see I left off, I forgot to include page 263. And so there's a new version in there now that has page 258 to 263. So if you kind of close the document you're in now and go, you'll see that there's a new version there, okay? Morning. Guys okay? A couple more minutes and then we'll talk. 2 more minutes. Okay. So, this section of the text is kind of, again, it's very similar to after the Russian Revolution, right? So we saw Lenin take control, and then he and his Bolsheviks had to try to kind of, create communism within the country. And Mao tries to do the same thing here, right? He's come into power, and he's going to try to sort of get communism going, right? And how does it go for him? What does he kind of do at the beginning? He what? He tries to Okay, so I guess in that way it's also very similar to Russia, because Russia isn't industrialized and neither is China, right? So he knows he has to move ahead with industrialization and to sort of promote industry. And he's also got to deal with agriculture, right? What's some of the things that he does? Redistribution? Okay, what does that mean? Right? So people in the past would have owned larger sections of land. Mao kind of divides it up and spreads it amongst the people, right? Which is an interesting first step, because the Russians didn't really do that, right? But Mao does it, right? What else happens here in this period? There's a bit of land redistribution. That's good. We know that he's trying to promote industry, because that's important. What else does Mao do? Right. So as this kind of process goes on through the 1950s, there's a little bit of a split in the party, right? How should China have its how should China operate, right? Where should the power be? And so again, as it's interesting to notice what happens in a communist system, because in a capitalist system, or in where China came from before, you had kind of economic divisions, right? So you had rich people, you had poor people. But then when you institute a communist system, basically you collapse that, right? There are no more rich people, maybe there's still poor people, but everyone's economically on the same kind of level, right? And so it's interesting to see how people will try to sort of, create another hierarchy, right? And a lot of times in a communist system, it's based on power and privilege, right? So if you're in a position where you can say yes and no to things that people need, then all of a sudden people have to do things for you, right? And so you kind of have the beginnings of corruption sometimes, as people kind of sell their influence, right? Or they sell their ability to approve certain things. But so we see this happen kind of early on in People's Republic, where as this kind of reorganization is starting, as the redistribution of land is starting, as people start to move to the cities and start to work in factories, we kind of see a split between the urban and the rural, right? The farm and the city. The new kind of, urban industrial communists, and then the kind of rural farming communists, right? And, the party leadership is kind of split between, well, how should we kind of run this country? Should power be spread out amongst, the rural farming communists, or should it be more concentrated in the industrial cities, right? And so there's a bit of a split going on, a bit of a divide as to what kind of how China's kind of communist government should really operate. What else do we hear about? They keep using this word in the text. What are cadres? That name came up a lot, or that word came up a lot. What's a cadre? Well, where is it? It's this. Did you see that word? So what is a cadre? Yeah. They have what?
Have some rights in organizations. Like they can tell the, like, for example, I am a cadres of a company, and like they are the boss, the CEO is higher than me, but I also have some other people who listen to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So cadres are someone who exists within an organization. They have some power over other people,
Yeah, but not that much.
but not that much. Yeah, that's true. What's their function here? What's kind of their job? Because we hear about them often, like streaming out of the cities into the rural areas of China. What are they doing?
For instance, like
Kind of, right? They're, if you wanted to imagine this as a religious thing, they're kind of like missionaries, right? Missionaries go out and try to spread the word of God, and they try to convert people to the religion, right? And here a cadre is kind of working in the same way, right? They're going out to the countryside and kind of converting people to communism, right? They're getting people to, follow the ideas of Mao, right? So they're kind of like, yeah, a communist missionary would probably be a good way of describing them, even though, again, one is religious and the other is kind of political or ideological, but they're kind of doing a similar thing. They're trying to convert people to communism and get them to do what Mao is asking them to do, right? So yeah, there's lots of cadres going out, telling people how this redistribution will work. There's some re-education going on, right? So they talk about the wealthy landowners, and we know in the Soviet Union those were kulaks, right? Kulaks and nepmen. And we know that Stalin basically banished or executed or, just kicked those guys out, right? And lots of them died. But here in China, they undergo kind of a re-education, right? And so if they kind of renounce their capitalist ways and they sort of get on board with communism, then they can be integrated into society, right? Integrated into this sort of farming collective, right? But in the Soviet Union, they were washed away, right? Which is a
I hear about from my grandma and grandpa who were farmers. There are some farmers to give some books to like full of what Mao said.
yeah,
They need to read it every day. Otherwise,
the little red book.
yeah, the little red book. They have to read it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, somebody will take you out to the jail or somewhere else. I don't know.
Yeah.
Have to do it.
Yeah, so that was part of the re-education as well, right? Is Mao's little red book of, it's kind of just like sayings, right? Like it's not a long story type thing. It's more like individual phrases, right? Well, that comes a little bit later. But yeah, we'll deal with that. But here it's a process of, trying to get people to do things in a communist way, right? And, for Mao, Mao's probably got an easier time than the Soviets did, because remember, when we had the Russian Revolution, the peasants didn't really want communism, right? We said that Lenin, overthrew the state by force and then kind of pushed communism on people, right? And then Stalin really, with an iron fist imposed it on people. But here, Mao has kind of been building a following for a while, right? And so it seems like the peasants are a little more receptive to the idea of communism, right? To the point where, when they're talking about collectivizing farms, we were just reading, and Mao wants people to collectivize more quickly, he just says it. And people do it, right? He just says, hey, we've got to get these farms together, we've got to collectivize, and people just run out and do it, right? Stalin had to execute people and send them to labor camps to get them to do this stuff. Mao just says it and people do it, right? Which is, again, pretty remarkable. And again, it's kind of foreshadowing for the Cultural Revolution, right? Where Mao is going to say something else and people just do it. They just do what he says. There's these cadres kind of going out, educating people, making sure that they are kind of doing things in a communist fashion, making sure that they're reading the Little Red Book. Is that what it's called? Is it just called the Little Red Book?
Translation into Chinese or something like this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's Mao's Red Book. Yeah. Does the book have a name? Does it have a title?
Yeah, Mao's World Record.
Yeah. So and again, I'll make the comparison between missionaries, right? Because missionaries go out, they try to convert people to their religion, and they usually give them a book, right? Read this book. Sometimes it's the Bible or whatever. But here we almost have a communist Bible, right? We have Mao's words, right, that you're supposed to read and remember and kind of live your life according to, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I think there's a comparison to be made between, the religious missionaries and then the communist missionaries, if you will, maybe. Um, 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 um. Okay. Let's press pause on it for now. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll do some project work, okay? I don't want to get too carried away with Mao and his activities, okay? So, yeah, take a break, come back, and we'll do some project stuff. Okay, everyone, we are back. So, like I mentioned to you, I think yesterday and maybe the day before, yes, the day before, um, we have a project to do, and I would like to know your topics by the end of the day today, okay? So, what I would like you to do is do some research, figure out your topic. I would like to know what your topic is going to be, and I would like to know who or whom you are working with, if anyone, right? So you can work in pairs or you can work on your own. It's up to you. Um, there'll be some sources to hand in a little bit later, but I think um, let's try to get our topics nailed down, and then we can move on with sources, okay? So I'm going to give you some time to do that. I'm just going to go upstairs for a second, and I will be right back. If you have any questions, you can ask me, okay? just want to press pause on you for a second here and just remind you of something, right? So before we leave today, I would like a topic from you that you're going to present on. And I just wanted to take a second to review this with you. Not this. Well, yeah, actually this, but in a minute. I want to review this. So this is the actual assignment for the sources, right? So I asked that you have 6 sources ready for me by Friday, right? And so I've just kind of written it up so you can see exactly what I'm asking for. So basically I want a list of 6 sources. It says 6 or more here. Like you can have more for your presentation later, but I just want 6 for right now. Typed up and put into MLA format. Okay, so if you need some help with your MLA formatting, you can find it at that link. And I'll show you, if you go to that link, oh, actually I gotta change something here. If you go to that link, there it is. If you go there, this site will kind of help you to format, okay? So doing these citations right has to do with getting the author and the title and where this piece of writing occurs and the date and the page numbers and all that formatted correctly, okay? And so you can see here that, you know, the name is formatted in a particular way, right? With the last name first, and then the first name, and then an initial if there is one. Sometimes you see the title of the source in italics there, and again, this will be easier to see once you go to the website, but that's okay. But if you look on the right here, if you look on the, hang on, I just can't see what I'm, yeah. If you look on the right here, you can jump to what you really want to see. And so for most of you, you'll be looking at periodicals like magazines or such. And so if you click on that, the website will kind of show you how to do that, right? And so there's some examples here where, you know, you've got the author's name, and then you've got the title of the thing you're reading, and then you've got kind of the magazine or the newspaper it appears in, right? So this second one there, you see with the name that starts with P, Ponewazik, I think. Ponewazik James. This article is called TV Makes a Too Close Call, and it appeared in Time magazine, right? So we know it comes from Time, and we know it's from November 20th, 2000, and we know it's on those pages, right? So people, if you cite this in your presentation, people can actually find it, right? And they can read the same thing that you read. And so this site can kind of take you through how to format those things. Periodicals are kind of magazines and newspapers and things. You may want to look at electronic sources as well, because if you pull something from a web page, there's a, whoops, that's not right, sorry. There's a particular way to cite things, right? And so again, the website will kind of show you the formatting, right? So sometimes the website will not have an author. So here you can see the Purdue Owl family. So there's no author there, so it's just the title of the site. But sometimes there is an author. So you can see below that there's a Dino Faluga. And so it just shows you how to properly cite, right? So it's really just getting the proper information in the right spot, right? The author, the title, where this thing is found, right? Is it a magazine? Is it a newspaper? Is it in a book? Is it on the web? And then getting the dates and page numbers included as well, right? So it's just kind of a matter of getting that formatted correctly. It's a big pain in the butt, I will tell you right now, having done lots of citation formatting. It's the worst, so I'm sorry, but you know, we're gonna do it because it's the right way to do things. So it'll be a little bit annoying, but it'll serve you well in university. So yeah, so you can you can reference that website just to sort of help you figure out how to do that. But yeah, so when I grade this assignment, where is it? When I grade this assignment, what I want to see is that you have 6 sources, that you formatted them correctly, that it's nicely typed out and it's very neat and it looks good, and that you have chosen reliable sources, right? So we talked about that yesterday. All of our sources have to be legitimate, from good, from people or from institutions that know what they're talking about, right? You can't build a good argument or write a good paper or anything if you have information that is faulty, right? So I want you to format it correctly. I want you to type it up and have it look nice, and I want them to be reliable sources. I want them to be sources we can trust in and we can believe, okay? So this document that I'm showing you here, that's in Microsoft Teams as well, under Files. Again, you've probably noticed that there's a folder there called Final Project. So this document will be in there if you want to refer to it. In the next, well, it probably won't be tomorrow. Hopefully by Friday, I will have kind of a marking guide in there for you, so that I will use this when I'm marking your presentation. So when you're building your presentation and getting organized, you'll know what I'm looking for, and you can kind of try to do that, okay? Now, are there any questions at the moment? Okay, so where is my list? Okay, so Jim, let me put you on the spot. Do you have a topic for me? Great Depression? Okay. The kind of focusing on the U.S.?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the question. There are a lot of great inventions actually, so I just choose one of them.
The Depression's kind of a global
Yeah, thing.
global
And then a lot of times, I think, like the American happened like 4 times. So.
Yeah, so we need to kind of shift it down, right? So if you wanted to deal with the Depression in the US or the Depression in Canada, sure. Yeah, then you can just stick to that, and that would be good. There's more than enough material. Yeah, the Americans made a big deal out of it. It was a big deal. They made a big deal, so you'll have no problem finding stuff there. Okay, perfect. Crazio.
There must be a thing about something happened or global.
Historical event in the 20th century that we haven't dealt with yet. Do you want to see that list from the other day?
Yes, can I say maybe like the last king in China?
Ooh, fall of the Manchu Dynasty?
No, I mean just one of the their last king. And for me, the short. Yeah.
Hmm.
Is that okay? Yeah, because I think it will just like relate the new China and the old China. He's just like a local.
I'm worried that there's not. I'm worried that there's not quite enough story there. I'm worried about that. Yeah. Do you have anything else in mind? I kind of feel like that. I kind of feel like there won't be enough to sink your teeth into on that, you know?
How long should be the presentation? How long the presentation?
10 minutes.
What about if I say the last king and the last eunuch? Then have the EUNUCH.
Eunuch?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Without the
I kind of feel like it's kind of outside of the scope of the 20th century because they, that dynasty collapses or is overthrown, and then sort of the 20th century events happen. So it's kind of like belongs more in the 1800s. So I think I'd rather do something else. I think I'd rather have you do something else. Let's see. Okay, you think for a minute. I'm gonna think too. Who's on my list next? Daniel, what are you gonna do? Say again? Still searching? Okay. Okay, so I've got and such. Yoya?
I would choose Gulf War.
Which one? Oh, Gulf War?
Yeah.
Sure. Sure, Gulf War it is. All right. Okay, so we've got to find something for Crazio and Daniel's still looking. Does anyone have any questions for me right this second? Because we're just about out of time.
I want to change the topic to
Prohibition?
prohibition.
Okay. We dealt with Prohibition a little bit already. Yeah, you could definitely dig into it. You could definitely dig into it with a little more depth. I think the civil rights movement is probably more interesting, and there's more interesting things to say. It's totally up to you.
Is it fine to decide that later?
I'd like you to stick with it. I'd like you to stick with it. Yeah, because Prohibition is kind of like, the story is like, that there was a strong movement to sort of ban alcohol. It got banned. People drank anyway, and then they decided it was a stupid idea and repealed it. And that's the story. There's a lot of, exciting stuff that happens. There's gang warfare, and, the cops are trying to chase these, illegal, alcohol manufacturers, and it's all very exciting. It makes for a good movie. If you're interested in a movie on that, check out The Untouchables, by the way. It's very good. But yeah, that's kind of it, right? So the civil rights movement, there's a lot more to talk about. So you'll have an easier time, I think. Yeah. I'm trying to set you up for success if I can. Okay. So maybe I'll end it there. Tomorrow, again, we'll come back to China, and maybe I'll have a little more time for you to work on your sources as well, okay? So that is it. Have a nice afternoon, and I will see you tomorrow, okay?